Thank you for that amazing welcome, Tony. Good to see you here in another capacity, and good day to everyone watching us and tuning in via Hopin. I'm Val Vesteel from IEDGE, and it is an honor for me to moderate this discussion with our esteemed panel of experts here on day one of the Sustainability Solutions Exchange trade event. It's been a packed first day, and now we have arrived at our afternoon session entitled Rethink Design for Responsible Consumption and Production. Truly, there is a variety of questions that we need to tackle when it comes to responsible consumption and production. Now, designing products that are both sustainable and value creating are welcome challenges that both big and small companies need to adapt in order to move toward a more circular economy. Now, in a few moments, we'll be tackling inquiries such as the following. How can manufacturers shift their business model from a linear to a circular system? As circular design streamlines sustainable goods for consumption, how can producers ascertain the participation of consumers in this relationship? And how does this translate into responsible consumption? So many buzzwords for this afternoon, and I'm hopeful that we can break down these concepts in the context of businesses for this afternoon's session. In the next few panel discussions at any point, if you have questions for our panelists, we invite you to send your questions via the chat or Q&A section found at the right portion of your screens. And later in the live Q&A, we will try our best to accommodate your inquiries. Jumpstarting our discussion for this session is Miss Amelia Juhl. Amelia is a design research director at IDO Tokyo. She brings more than 20 years of experience leading creative projects of all sizes. At IDEO, she has worked on projects such as redesigning medical products for the elderly, new beauty experiences for millennials, and systemic redesigns for agriculture. Her current passion is in adding life-centered principles to her human-centered approach. She is excited to lend her expertise in the innovation to help businesses be more regenerative by design for the next decade. Let us all welcome Miss Amelia Juhl.
Hey, hello. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Amelia, and I'm a design director at IDO Tokyo. My background is in design research, which means I spent a lot of time understanding people, observing how they think and behave in order to design better products, services, and systems. IDEO started 40 years ago as an industrial design firm, and the most famous product design is our original Apple mouse. And since then, we've not only designed beautiful products, but we also design services, like we explore the future of the kitchen with IKEA, or wearable digital fashion experiences with Google and Levi's, and working with ventures like PillPack to help them design and scale their business. We began working with on circularity when our then CEO, Tim Brown, met with Ellen from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And since then, we see shifting to a circular economy as an urgent global priority. And we feel strongly that it needs to be designed. We need to design new systems for industry and economy. One of the first things we did working with Ellen MacArthur Foundation was to design a circular design guide. It includes circular mindsets, case studies, methodologies, and worksheets, and how to facilitate workshops. So you can learn more by searching for this online. A brief overview of circular economy and its three principles. The first is to think about the entire life cycle of a product or service and to design in a way that does not produce waste to begin with. The second is to keep materials in circulation at their highest value so that they can be reused as much as possible. And lastly, we aim to create designs that restore natural materials by returning them to the soil. So basically subtracting materials, circulating them, and using the power of nature, we can reduce costs in the medium to long term from a business perspective and also improve the quality of services and products we provide. And circularity relates to climate change. Oftentimes, the conversation centers around switching to renewable energy, but then there's still a remaining 45% of emissions coming from corporate economic activities and how we source, make, and deliver products. And that's what circularity can address and help in reversing climate change. So why are the world's most largest corporations engaging in exploring circular systems? One is to future-proof, which is to anticipate tightening of environmental regulations, an unstable climate, rapid changes in consumer mindsets, and to get ahead of these risks by experimenting with circular systems. Another is building new revenue streams. By shifting from selling products to selling circular services means you can find new sources of revenue. For example, Philips, instead of selling lighting hardware, sells lighting as a service and guarantees a level of performance over time. Another is to retain value in materials, which means less cost. Apple has made a commitment to create products without extracting new resources from the earth, which is a major commitment for a manufacturer. So they're now designing ways that make it easier to collect, take apart, and reuse their products and materials. The last is purpose. The strength of a circular and sustainable company is that its purpose is clear, which makes it easier to motivate employees and recruit Gen Z who are much more sensitive to environment and social causes. At IDO, we've worked on many projects across the circular economy. With Kipling, we worked on a business model and service design for a rental service for their travel bags. And with a consumer packaging company, we explored how we could create a standard packaging design for a household product that could be used across their many brands, and it would make refilling and collecting easier. And with Nike, we looked at their Nike grind material and worked on a challenge to try to find ways to make use of this excess material. And with a major IT device manufacturer, we worked on ways to how to collect devices through conversations with users. I can lastly introduce 3 approaches we have at IDO for accelerating circular systems and design. One is to set bold circular vision so you can enable people to focus their creative energies around it. One way we've done this at IDO is through an innovation crowdsourcing platform called Open IDO. We recently hosted a challenge called Beyond the Bag, which is a cross-retail collaboration with CVS, Walmart, Kroger, and it aimed to identify and test and implement alternatives to single-use plastic bags, ones that provide ease of use and convenience, but also reduces environmental impact. We had over 450 entries from 60 countries, from amateurs to design firms. So bold visions, setting bold visions are a way to mobilize and enable creativity. Another is to develop and scale ideas through experimentation and prototyping. So this is an example of live prototyping. The clients were a 3-way joint project. So it was a major food brand, a beverage company, and Union Square Park in New York. And the design challenge was to experiment with how resource collection in a park could be changed through better trash can design. And so using this live prototyping approach, we repeated the cycle of prototyping and learning and iterating to create intuitive, modular, color-coded designs that would increase collection rates and reduce waste. Another approach is to convene our supply chains and industries, and we think this is going to be important. The challenges that we face are so big, it cannot be solved by one company. And so we promote cross-industry collaboration through collabs that we set up for fashion and plastic and food systems. And in a week-long design workshop, participants were brought together from companies usually considered competitive to design prototypes together to imagine new infrastructures, standards, and policies that can be enjoyed across the industry. So those were 3 approaches that we use at IDO: setting bold visions to unleash creativity, accelerating through prototyping, and convening across supply chains and industries. So that's all for me today. Thank you for this opportunity, and please feel free to reach out anytime.
Thank you very much, Miss Amelia. There are many good reasons why we experiment with the circular economy. As you had said, you get to build new revenue streams. You get to be more purpose-driven as an organization, and that is you have presented some proofs of concept that businesses need to hear and recognize as well. Thank you for that. Next, let us hear from Dr. Kathleen Aviso, Dean of the Gokongwei College of Engineering of De La Salle University, Manila. Kathleen B. Aviso is a university fellow and a professor of the Department of Chemical Engineering and currently the Dean of the Gokongwei College of Engineering of De La Salle University, Manila in the Philippines. Her main research interest is the development of decision support tools for environmental decision making, which have been applied for the design of systems such as eco-industrial parks and low-carbon energy systems. She received her Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering cum laude from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Her Master's in Environmental Engineering and Management from De La Salle University and her PhD degree in Industrial Engineering from De La Salle University. She's currently the Executive Director for the Journal of Cleaner Production and an editor for the South African Journal of Chemical Engineering. She is also a part of the editorial board of Process Integration and Optimization for Sustainability, Computers in Industry, Digital Chemical Engineering, and part of the editorial advisory board of Helion. She's the author of the book Input-Output Models for Sustainable Industrial Systems. For her scientific work, Professor Aviso has received multiple scientific awards from government and professional organizations in the Philippines. Let us all welcome Dr. Kathleen Aviso.
Good afternoon, everyone. And this afternoon, I'll be sharing with you some of our work on post-pandemic plastic pollution outlook. One emerging environmental concern is the continued increase in plastic waste being generated globally. This has resulted not just in macro pollution, but also the trickling of microplastics in water bodies, which greatly impact marine life. Just recently, the UN has approved the creation of a plastics pollution treaty to address this growing concern. It aims to put restrictions in the production, use, and design of plastics, and is expected to impact businesses and economies, most especially major plastic-producing countries. This can be seen as a threat to current operations, or it can be seen as an opportunity for manufacturing enterprises to innovate. This presentation is based from our recent work, which was published in 2020 in the journal Cleaner and Responsible Consumption. This manuscript is open access, so you can download a copy by scanning the QR code you can see here on this slide. At the height of the pandemic, we heard news about potential reductions in greenhouse gas emissions because of disrupted industrial activities imposed by the lockdowns. However, we also observed an increased generation of plastic waste from personal protective equipment and the disposal of medical supplies, which became necessary for combating the pandemic. In addition, there was an increase in the disposal of packaging materials from households due to an increase in online purchase and delivery of products. There was a sudden quick adoption of digital consumption using various online platforms. There was a rise in demand for the digital market, changing the production and consumption patterns of individuals and economies. The question then is whether such disruptive events, such as the pandemic, can eventually usher us towards sustainable consumption. What we found is that though purchasing activities have moved online, the products being purchased remain to be physical and all still bear environmental impacts. In fact, the increased demand for online purchase has also increased the demand for logistics, and access to the global market may increase emissions generated from the transport of goods and services worldwide. There is a need to carefully examine the environmental impact of production and consumption activities throughout the product life cycle. In this slide, you can see the change in direct material consumption within the period of 2010 to 2015. For Asia and the Pacific, one of the main drivers of increased material use is affluence. Developing strategies towards sustainability should thus look at the interaction between the producers and consumers to ensure that sustainable product design leads to the transformation of consumer choices and behavior. We need a systems perspective to account for environmental impact at each stage of the product lifecycle or supply chain. Poke-yoke designs, which lock in sustainable behavior by reinforcing conditions that reduce or limit the impact from product use, is one strategy. There is also a need to guard against the unintended effects, which result in revenge consumption and rebound effects. Some tools which can be used to account for the overall environmental impact of products and services include life cycle assessment, material flow accounting, and extended environmental input-output analysis. So in conclusion, here are some takeaway points from our work. Plastic pollution is now a global concern, which will affect manufacturing enterprises and economies. The recent pandemic has actually exacerbated this particular concern. Managing plastic pollution, as well as other environmental issues, will require both top-down and bottom-up approaches. We have also seen that producer and consumer choices are interlinked. Future solutions should cover policy, technology, and behavior, and circular economy can provide us with a framework for developing integrated solutions. So with that, thank you very much for your attention, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have in the Q&A forum.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aviso. I think it's important that we really recognize and acknowledge that every stage of the system needs to be taken care of if we want to talk about, sustainability and how it contributes to a more circular economy. Thank you so much for that, and we'll hear more from you later on in our panel question and answer. Next, let us hear from Dave Albao, Executive Director of the Philippine Reef and Rainforest Conservation Foundation Incorporated. Dave Albao works on natural climate solutions as the Executive Director of the Philippine Reef and Rainforest Conservation Foundation. They care for Danhugan Island, a wildlife sanctuary with environmental education and ecotourism located in Negros, Philippines. Been blessed to have been there, so make your way through there as well if you want to. They're also implementing projects funded by USAID and the EU on reducing ocean plastic and mainstreaming circular economy with the homegrown Wala Usik campaign. Dave was a professional fellow on sustainability in Oregon, USA, a graduate of Swedish Institute Management Program on Sustainable Business, a Governor's Conservation Achievement Awardee, and a Gen T Leader of Tomorrow for 2021, named by Tatler Asia for their work on nature conservancy. It's time to hear from you, Dave Albao.
Thank you, Val. My name is Dave, and I come from Negros, and I will be sharing with you today our journey for enabling communities to rethink design for sustainable consumption and production. I have to mention that our cost comes from our establishment work for marine protected areas, really protecting coral reefs and all of that. And our communities would always have cleanups and find that there would be single-use plastic packaging that would top the list of items that they would pick up. So over the years with our foundation, we were able to understand that plastic from land sources would actually affect fish stocks in the MPAs that we work with. So in the last 6 years, we were able to conceptualize this campaign called Wala Usik, which means nothing is wasted. And our central design question was, how can we transition the sari-sari store so that it uses less single-use plastic packaging? Are we able to sell the same fast-moving consumer goods like condiments for the kitchen, personal and home care products, in such a way that they're dispensed with the same volumes, same price points, but without the sachets? I know this was quite challenging, but we were able to prototype 8 sari-sari stores in this island of Negros. And it's interesting how these innovations have modernized as well. However, I would like to point out that for us to enable communities to circular business practices, we have to tap into practices of the past. So we need to look at how the sari-sari stores operated pre-plastic, and we're able to find out that before we would use reusable materials or locally produced packaging. And this is something that really inspired us because we saw that in this language of wala usik, meaning, you're not wasting anything because you're valuing all the resources that the community has produced, you're able to truly value everything, including the packaging that comes with their products. And this is why we believe that the zero waste or the circular economy or sustainability practices of micro businesses such as sari-sari stores need to be communicated in line with our culture, in line with our heritage. And this is something very powerful as a learning for us here in Negros. And so in the last 5 years, we were able to innovate with the community some models for circular business practices at the sari-sari store level, but also expanded recently to the carinderias or the cafes and the small restaurants in the community. So obviously you'd have refilling models. So, in the past, when you buy cooking oil, I'm sure some of you have experienced bringing an empty glass bottle to that store. And so all of these items, like using other materials, but also native packaging is something that we explored in this project. I'm excited to share more about this in the panel. So if you want to learn more, we have information available through our social media, and you're able to contact us for more details. Thank you so much. Back to you, Val.
Thank you, Dave. Really interesting. If there's one other thing that I took away from that, it's the importance of the context of culture. And I think wala usik, I saw that wala usik builds from the practices of the past. And that's very interesting. And we hope we could talk more about that in our panel now, which we are arriving into. Now that we've heard the insights of our esteemed panel, let us now ask the hard-hitting questions regarding the adoption of a sustainable lifestyle and a circular economy. Good afternoon once again, Dave, Kathleen, and Amelia, or good morning, wherever you are in the world. Now, transitioning to a more sustainable lifestyle requires behavioral change. And in my experience in the media and communications industry, we have what we call SBCC, or social behavioral change communications. Now, but in the context of businesses and small medium enterprises, what are the key factors that MSMEs can adapt in their practices in order to aid and support this transition in rethinking how they consume and basically how they live their lives? Anyone can take the ball to answer this question first?
Okay,
Dave, I see you smile. Okay, go ahead. We'll go to Dr. Aviso and then head on over to Dave after.
Okay. Yeah, for the MSMEs, I think as with anyone, I'm sure we've heard about what doesn't get measured doesn't get managed. So I guess that's one of the things that we must be conscious about in terms of the utilities that we consume and all the other materials that are needed for any SMEs to function. To be aware exactly of how much these are, because it's possible to actually identify areas for improvement so that you can improve efficiency, so that you can further reduce the consumption of your materials and resources and make more efficient utilization of these things. So I guess that's it for me.
Thank you, Dr. Aviso. What doesn't get measured doesn't get managed. I like that. That's our tweet for today. Thank you, Dr. Aviso. How about you, Dave? You wanted to add something. Go ahead.
I can add up to that, to Dr. Aviso's statement that you don't know what you've got until it's gone, right? But I think in the context of the social behavior change communications aspect, Val, I'm very, very vocal about this, that we need to translate the principles of circular economy and sustainability in the local language. When zero waste and circular economy started to pop up in the work that we do, we of course started with using those words, and we realized that sometimes it's alienating or very foreign to the communities. But then we discovered beautifully, we had a breakthrough when we were asking what is zero waste in our language, and we found wala usik or walay usik in Bisaya. and walang sayang in Tagalog. And it's something that is, something that everyone understands. It's rooted, and we remember our grandmothers telling us not to waste the rice on our plates, diba? They say wala usik. But we can transform that, and we can adapt that to the modern movement for circular economy, but also looking back at our culture and communicating it in such a way that it's not alienating anymore. This is something that we've discovered. I see top-up design, but also bottom-up approach needs this kind of context to communicate. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. You never know the worth of water until the well runs dry. Until the well runs dry. Yeah. For Miss Amelia, you're working with obviously a big company such as IDO. What do you think MSMEs can get from the practices of IDO in terms of practices in order to aid and support the transition to a more sustainable lifestyle?
Yeah, I would say a lot of times we hear about, how does the consumer behavior change? But I often think that actually, for larger companies, I say, they shouldn't wait for consumers to get on board. I really think it needs to start on the company side with a strong belief in responsibility that they need to be sustainable. And when you do that, then you can create sustainable product experiences that are equal or superior to existing ones. And in which case, then the consumer will just be selecting the superior experience, and which also comes with a touch of good conscience. And I think that's because a lot of the greater impact can be had in upstream design. So instead of trying to figure out what to do with waste at the end of a product cycle, there's much greater impact in thinking about how not to create waste in the first place. So you design the product without waste. And in Japan, a lot of consumers are good at following directions. They like very clear rules, so the local government can ask people to separate their trash, and each household has this weekly timetable with glass, cans, cardboard, and it's taken them on different days, and it works really well. And it's great that people are willing to do that. But what if we designed products that didn't need packaging in the first place? And I love what you're doing with the Sorry store and going back to the basics. But yeah, maybe for other companies, maybe it's a toothbrush that doesn't come in a tube, but in a glass jar, and there's little tablets that you can crush in your mouth. And it comes in a monthly subscription. So you get tablets delivered to your mailbox, and then you can refill your little glass. And if people realize that the quality of this paste is the same as their usual toothpaste, then the rest of the experience might be better because you subscribe, and then you just set and forget, and you'll never need to remember to buy toothpaste again. Yeah, I think there are ways that you can think of, looking at your entire product experience or life cycle, finding the opportunities to change. And then creating just a better consumer experience out of it, instead of trying to really change consumer behavior.
Really interesting. So much goes into wanting to change behavior or wanting to promote a more sustainable lifestyle. And you mentioned it, Miss Amelia, apart from having superior experience, customer experience with a product, there's also a consideration of what's the lifestyle of people currently, and are they following guidance that is already set by companies? And then also even from the production of the products themselves. That's a lot to think about, actually, and we have more time to break that down. Now, as circular design streamlines sustainable goods for consumption, this is something that we need to think about from the producer's perspective. So how can producers ascertain the participation of consumers in this relationship? Because we don't work in silos where we create a sustainable system where we just do it for the consumers or do it for the producers. It's aligned in one whole cycle and system. So how does this translate into responsible consumption now? Anyone
maybe I
can take a
can
jab at
begin
that.
again.
Go ahead, Dr. Aviso.
All right, maybe I'd like to take also from what Amelia mentioned a while ago. So it's really about designing products so that the consumers will be encouraged to keep on using them without really being so conscious at the beginning that they're being more sustainable. And like she mentioned, it is about creating that experience. So like I also discussed in my presentation earlier, I believe it also came from Japan, where they had this pokeyoki design of products that ensure that customers do not make use of products wrongly or in the incorrect way. For example, just the simple plugging and making sure that the orientation of plugging is correct so that the life of that particular appliance is maximized. So the same principles can actually be used to ensure transition towards sustainability. For example, you can make it easier for consumers to unplug devices, for example, or appliances, instead of just leaving them plugged all the time, which in turn consumes more electricity for them. So it's really trying to try to influence that behavior and trying to make such kinds of products more trendy, because I know a lot of consumers are really sometimes just following with the trend. So making that experience better for consumers is one of the key factors, I think, for adopting products that are more sustainable.
Thank you, Dr. Aviso. And Dave, you've certainly worked with a lot of producers and maybe suppliers with Wala Usik. How has that conversation been with that, us making certain the participation of consumers in the relationship of sustainable consumption and production?
I'd like to cross-reference what Amelia said earlier, that it's not necessarily the consumer's burden to design, the products, right? We always hear the narrative that businesses are meeting the demand of, single-use packaging, basically. But, it could be the other way around. That's what we're trying to show with our little project here, that there's somewhere, communities are actually trying to design from the bottom up. And that's a very hard thing to do because you've got top-down logistics already set up. And this is what we found out, that you cannot deliver refilling options if there's regulatory barriers or there's technical barriers to doing that right now. I mean, I am one with the agencies that protect the consumer welfare when it comes to like transitioning, but at the same time, the environment is currently inhibiting or even prohibitive because of these, the lack of support. So basically the logistics or the distribution system is so difficult to disrupt, right? But what we discovered is that there are distribution systems that already exist that could be circular, and we could actually learn from them. You have bottling plants before, and that was a circular model of delivering beverages. This is and now we also see the water refilling station, right? It's something, I mean, of course, there are many more questions that will come when you say you'll transition personal home care products to refilling, like what you see in the water jugs, right? Are you know what I mean, Val? Those when you run out of water at home, you can just like order and somebody delivers it to you and removes the container. This is like the milk person, right, coming to your door and refilling your goods. This is something that has already existed in the past, and yet, I guess for the direction of business to really look back into this and see the costs that are being externalized if we continue communicating that single-use packaging is the magic bullet for consumers. It is not the magic bullet, it's actually a curse. And we've already fueled into that. And one last point, the amount of advertising for these products in the last decade or maybe couple of decades has actually contributed to this. So are we also putting enough advertising content that promotes circular economy that is equivalent to the decades worth of billions of dollars worth of advertising? This is something that we need to reflect on as a community, and businesses can take this opportunity to actually talk with their consumers and see what needs to be redesigned. And there's a lot to do, but of course, and that's why we're here. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, I kind of re-echo that innovation doesn't just, necessarily mean moving forward. It can also mean looking back at the past and seeing the trends and the history of what it was back in the days. And I think if we are wanting to consume less and produce less, definitely there were less things to consume and less waste in the past because of, it was not as innovative and as an era yet in the past, and it had less pollution and less waste in that sector. And yeah, when they've mentioned the bottoms up approach, I remember one of our workshops in Sipalay with Wala Usik, one of the first few workshops where we really helped worked with sari store owners, convenience store owners, in designing what to them is a sustainable sari store. We just don't operate in our knowledge and expertise lined up in this, echo chamber of innovation. But then we go down to the consumers. We go down to the actual people who are doing the work that we desire for them to do in terms of adapting sustainability into their businesses. So that's really something that lots of other NGOs and organizations can take inspiration from. Amelia, we go now to you. How about you? How do you make sure that producers ascertain the participation of consumers in sustainable goods for consumption?
Yeah, I think one is definitely what I mentioned earlier. So starting with, producers being responsible and creating superior experiences. Maybe the second one, I think it's very close to what the others were saying, but an important part is storytelling. I think as consumers, we just are not aware of the production process. It's kind of a black box how products arrive on shelves in stores. And so what are all the activities that are taking place in order to bring this product here? And then how is it being used? And then what happens afterwards? That we are just not hearing enough of. So, what does it take to get a cotton shirt to the market? There's land and soil that's actually being degraded from industrial agricultural practices. There's people in textile mills, who may be exposed to, hazardous chemicals. And then, how does it get to the shelf? What kind, is there, we're using fossil fuels for these, textile materials to go back and forth between different countries because our supply chains are so distributed. And so a lot of labor and energy and water is being used in the process. And then when it gets to us, our clothes are often just sitting in the closet. I think for Japan, it was like we buy 5 new items and the majority it just is sitting unused in the closet. So utilization is very low. And then afterwards it gets, it's off to landfill and hardly is recycled or reused. So, this type of process, I think, needs to be exposed. Maybe it's a little bit negative. Maybe from the producer's point of view, I think you can, by being responsible, you can look at this, the ecosystem that you've built, and identify opportunities where you're going to change it so that it's your business process is actually improving the lives of your workers or the communities that your factories are in, or the environment that it is in. And there's many models of doing that. And if you can story tell that process, I think people will slowly awaken. Everyone has different timelines for when they make that sustainability switch, but it does happen. So we just need to keep telling these stories.
I couldn't agree more on storytelling. IEJ is in the business of storytelling, so we're definitely excited to tell more stories of innovation, of a circular economy. We're not, crawling in the dark. People are doing business initiatives that are sustainable. There are proofs of concept. It's just, are these kinds of stories being told? And that's where storytellers and the media come in, trying to amplify the work that you do with IDO, with Dr. Aviso's work as well, and with Wala Usik as well. I'm going to keep you on the spotlight, Miss Amelia, because we have a question from our audience. You're in IDO Tokyo right now, and let's try to bring it closer to home here in the Philippines. So that we have a question: has IDO worked with brands or organizations from the Philippines? And what are the usual services that are requested from IDO by companies? Maybe not necessarily from the Philippines, starting the shift. How have they adapted to this shift? That's your question.
So yes, we do work with companies in the Philippines. We just actually recently completed one. For confidentiality, it's difficult for me to explain details, but yes, we have worked with companies, and it was in the education sector. Yeah, maybe a couple of years from now, we'll be able to tell this story more publicly. And then in terms of the usual services that are requested by IDO, we're a design consulting firm. So we work with companies from any industry, basically to innovate on their products, on their services. We help organizations change and transform. I think, so sustainability and circular design is just one part of the many types of different questions that we receive. And so it's difficult for me to say whether there's, similarities or discrepancies. I would say the most recent project we worked on in terms of education is very similar. It's very similar to other requests around education that we get from outside the Philippines. And in terms of have we gotten any requests to work on sustainable projects from the Philippines, not yet, but we would be very open to, of course, working out of our Tokyo, or we also have a Shanghai studio.
Mm-mm. That's a green light for everybody watching us on the stream. If you want to engage with IDO on the design process of products or any sustainability initiatives, heard that straight from Miss Amelia. She is definitely open to that. Now, Dave, this question is for you from Jack of Produce for Jack Reynoso. And he asks, as part of the Philippine Reef Conservation Foundation, or PRRCFI, what's your stand on marine animal consumption and the contribution on the degradation on the marine ecosystems and its impact on the climate change? This is a shift to the discussion a bit, but I think it can still be hinged on our responsible consumption and production as well. Go ahead.
What we found, Val, is that communities do care about the amount of fish that's in the ocean. I mean, if they're witnessing that there's a fish catch decline, and when you relate that to the plastic pollution rate of the ocean, it really matters to them, like, right? I mean, there's this repeated forecast that there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean by weight in the year 2050. I mean, a lot of other research is contesting that figure. But what we can see on the ground is that people actually care about the fish. So in terms of conservation of fish, which means also transitioning towards a plant-based protein, for example, a just transition to alternative protein is something that we recognize, of course. But I have to say, was that Jackie? This is a very nuanced conversation. We are inserting fish stocks here, but of course, because it is a nuanced issue. But at the same time, it is not equitable for us to just demand the fishers to just leave off the fish. I mean, honestly, even if I don't like eating fish, I try to be plant-based. But yes, that is there's a lot of nuance to that when you have communities depend on this livelihood, and you can't just what we're for is the just transition. At the same time, it's the same thing with plastic. When we're transitioning, it should be just to the communities, meaning they're not left out in the design process. I think IDO would Amelia would actually agree that we have to empathize. Transition is not easy if the system is not enabling it. So we don't have an enabling environment for a transition, whether it's for transitioning to less plastic or less meat or fish in the diet. We need to first set up that enabling environment. And that's what we're all trying to do.
There is so much desire to do that transition from many sectors of many communities all over the Philippines. And they've pointed out that we need to couple that desire for transition with a more enabling system and an enabling environment. And I hope the decision makers and the people in power recognize this so that we can work alongside them to create this enabling environment. We have a question for Amelia and Dr. Kathleen from Bianca Gregorio. Are there any untapped resources in sustainable design that you feel should be utilized more? Dr. Aviso, maybe we could start with you.
Okay, in terms of, let me have a look at that question. Okay, so untapped resources in terms of sustainable design. I think it's really more of awareness and really knowing more about your products or your processes, because some of these things are really very customized, and the situation varies from one type of product to the next. So there are different strategies that can be done and various resources that can be looked into when you're dealing with certain types of products. So for example, if we wanted to ensure recyclability and increase circularity within certain types of products, we also need to make sure that these items have been designed for recyclability in such a way that they are easier to segregate from each other, so that certain companies, for example, or technologies can readily take on the waste and actually recycle these things or reuse them for something else. Other things would be like, for now, we can see the possibility of reducing some of the minerals that are non-renewable. So for example, phosphorus is something that we make use of regularly for food production, but then we don't also realize that the availability is depleting. So we also need to find technologies and strategies on how we can further recover these minerals for use in future processes, to make sure that we keep on satisfying the demands for products and services. So I guess that's it for me.
Thank you, Dr. Kathleen. Just wondering, just an additional question, and anyone in the panel can answer this as well. You talked about that how items must be designed for recyclability in the design process, of building that kind of product. And we've had some of our needs analysis workshops we have recently in terms of businesses integrating to a more sustainable model in their operations. And the concern that always comes up is, where can we get experts on the design of making sure that the products are more, there's recyclability, it's more sustainable, it feeds into the circular ecosystem? Do we have to hire somebody? Where are the experts? What Google search item can I do as a business in terms of who are the experts in designing products that will feed into this circular and that's very valid, because if I were a business, I want my products to be sustainable at the onset, but who can do it?
Okay, so I think so the businesses, the companies should really commit towards sustainability. I mean, I've also talked with companies wherein they've really put in sustainability as their priority, and they've really made efforts to identify consultants and experts who can help them in this particular initiative. I'm sure Amelia will be able to answer more regarding those. I think IDO would be an example of that particular company that can help industries and companies develop more innovative designs for sustainability.
Yeah, do we have to have like a separate hiring for a sustainability manager? Amelia, can you share us with us your thoughts?
Right. I mean, yes, there are experts, I believe, and for each different type of project, we do try to identify the experts. At the same time, for like recyclability and things that are technical or material innovation, I think there are experts. And then there's other areas where there aren't experts because we're trying to create something new. We need to pioneer a new way of doing things. And for that, we just need to be able to bring the right people into the room. Maybe it's the stakeholders, maybe it's not a tangential, but like maybe it's several experts who aren't expert on that specific thing, but tangential enough to the topic, so that we're getting productive inputs that then help us collectively make the right decisions. I think that's why there's a lot of convening in this space. We need to bring in different viewpoints in order to design something new. For example, we created we were working on alternatives to the single-use plastic cups. So this was the next gen cup challenge, and we were looking at reuse models. So for like coffee shops, instead of these takeaway cups, what is the reuse format? And to design that, we needed to speak with obviously the end consumers, but also understand baristas and the people that were hiring the baristas and the people who are operationalizing the cleaning and the pickup and then also the city. We needed to involve the policymakers of the city, and so everyone needed to come together, and we needed to form this new knowledge around reuse models together.
Val, could I add also something?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I think another thing, if most of our audience are MSMEs, maybe it would be a good opportunity to try and link up with institutions and universities. I know that a lot of MSMEs probably don't have their own research and development department, but then these are also things that universities are trying to work on. So it's possible to have a collaboration with universities so that they can tap on, professors who might have expertise on that, and they can actually work on these problems. And I'm sure institutions and universities are also looking at those things, like problems that they can solve that are really making an impact to the industry and the communities.
Thank you, Dr. Kathleen. Go ahead, Dave.
I just wanted to really agree with Amelia's discussion on there's so many people involved, that you need to consult everyone, including the barista, the store owner, especially the MSME owners. I mean, that we're in the pandemic and they took a huge hit, and for them to participate, I would just say sometimes in our work, we often refer to these stakeholders as experts themselves. They're experts in terms of running their own business, right? I mean, I had the huge mistake sometimes that I go to communities and say, oh no, you should change your system, right? I mean, that Val, we talk about this parachute conservation is the same. It's like we're parachuted to communities that we don't even know about. And when they get there, they're like, who are you to say that? Because you don't live our lives, But that's, I just wanted to also say that there's guidance everywhere that is true as well. We're pioneering work, especially in the Philippines. With Wala Usik, I just want to address some questions that I've seen so far, just in one quick answer. You remember the Wala Usik sari-sari stores? People have asked us, how did it go? What did you learn? I mean, what are the challenges? What are the barriers? We would like to know. So over the last 1 or 2 years, actually, we're building this framework, this toolkit that we have designed as a toolkit for MSMEs. We're releasing that really soon. It's called Ibalik ang Wala Usik, meaning in English, go back to zero waste. It's a toolkit for circular business ideas for micro businesses like sari-sari stores. So we're going to detail, but it's not a prescriptive guidebook. We're not going to teach people to how to do it, but we will share what we think people need to think about, because this is what we've learned. And what are the other case studies? So we're launching the toolkit. We're going to be tackling refilling, of course, but there are other models, and I've seen the other questions. There are low tech, and this is we don't, it doesn't mean that we go back to the past as if like we need to wear the barong saya again, right? But what we're trying to do here is understand the wisdom of the past pre-plastic and how did it operate, and we do see low-tech models like repair. So somebody asked, Angelica asked, is there a case here for repairing? Of course there are. You look at markets like in city centers, you would see zapateros, like those shoe repair small businesses, right? You would have also other models like rental models. In Bacolod, where I am, we still have gown and barong rentals. Like when you go to a location, I don't know if you remember these things, but they actually still exist right now. And we have ukay, that when clothes get sold. And also other models like sometimes not even non-traditional commercial models like barters. So there are things that there are already practices and technology that's here. We are pioneering in the modern time because we have already been used to the convenience of plastic. So we are unlearning these things, and hopefully, our little project can share a little bit of knowledge and start that literature when it comes to like the experience of small, especially micro businesses, Val. And lastly, because of the pandemic, that is also another challenge. I believe that DTI and other agencies would be the best venues for providing guidance to these businesses. If we do have a registry or maybe sustainability.ph, this is a good online platform where people can just visit and businesses can visit and learn from each other.
Thank you for that, Dave. Might Miss Amelia and Dr. Kathleen also have resources or platforms of opportunity that they can share when learning more about circular design? Maybe you can share your resources now, because we have an audience member, Janelle Aringo, asking if there are opportunities to learn more about circular design. I'm sure there are, but where are they? Can you please share it with us?
Okay, in the university. All right, so maybe on my end, maybe that's one thing that they can explore. Thank you for bringing up this particular question. Recently, De La Salle University has created the School for Lifelong Learning. And since it seems like this is something of interest, so maybe we'll try to develop a module particularly on that. I know that some individuals and maybe practitioners are not for going into graduate school because it's such a long or very big investment on their end. But the School of Lifelong Learning is, I think, a good middle ground. It's like a stepping stone for those who cannot commit to an entire master's degree program or a PhD.
Is there a scholarship for that? I should sign up for that right now.
For the School of Lifelong Learning, not yet. But for the graduate school,
Dave,
we do have
batchmate
scholarships.
tayo, ha? Miss Amelia, yes, you wanted to share something as well.
Yes, I mentioned in my presentation, but we have a site that we created together with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, all about the circular economy and circular design. It's called the Circular Design Guide. If you just look up circulardesignguide.com, you'll find it. It has a lot of our methodologies, the mindsets you need, a lot of case studies, workshop materials. So if you have a way to bring together stakeholders within your business, you can directly use the workshop materials to think through different circular strategies. I think I do love the circular strategies. It's an easy way to kind of get your mind around how you can create circular business. For example, things like turning a product into a service, or different ways to extend the life of your products. Or I think we're familiar with things like sharing economy, or take back systems. But all of the circular strategies are listed together with case studies. And so I think that's a good resource. But another one that's not related to IDO, I would point you towards the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. They have a lot of reports, a lot of case studies. So if you are in, the packaging business, they have a great report called Upstream Innovation, with many ways that you can look at different reuse models or new materials, or ways to eliminate materials altogether. But if you're also in fashion, they have a great fashion report as well with many cases. So yeah, please look at those two resources.
That is a treasure chest of resources that you shared. Thank you, Miss Amelia and Dr. Kathleen. Now, in sustainability, in wanting to move towards a circular economy, transition into that, the first step is always the hardest to take, which is, stepping foot and actually getting to step one and starting it. Now, we have a question from Carlo. Do you have any anecdotes on what are good starting points for circular design when it comes to entrepreneurs wanting to start something impactful and circular? If we have entrepreneurs here with us listening, they're probably wondering, what's a good starting point for circular design? Do our panelists have any inputs? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
If I may, you were witness to some of these workshops. We call them walausik workshops. So actually, it also agrees to Dr. Aviso's reference later for measuring. So we start with understanding the waste that they produce from their businesses. So it's a waste audit. There's many templates there, many approaches. But what we also advocate for is the non-judgmental audit, really just looking at how much you produce and even look at the costs of managing that waste. If they're all mixed all together, then we also have this template where it shows where it goes. So it is very crucial to the empathy stage of the design process with the store owners so that they actually understand what they're trying to solve and see them. So for us, cleanups are, they're not useful if they're not educational or if they don't talk about how much is there to understand, So I start with the walausik audits, meaning waste audits of our businesses.
Waste audits. Please take note of that. Waste audits. Dr. Kathleen, you wanted to share something.
Oh, okay. So I think when it comes to circular design, especially if you're just starting up, I think the best way is really to start from the design. We have this concept when it comes to safety, which is inherently safer designs, wherein you really start from the conceptualization phase and making sure that the process that you're doing or the product that you're doing is safer, and looking at various alternatives for manufacturing a particular product and trying to evaluate each step and see which of those pathways would lead you to a safer design. I think the same concept can be applied for circularity, wherein you try to explore the different pathways of production and consumption. And I think it's been mentioned again and again in this forum, is that for any product or any service, its impact isn't just at one phase. So there are environmental impacts at each stage as you produce, use, and dispose your product. So I think it's really good to start at the conceptual phase, because it is the point where you can still make changes and not like when it's already there and you have to make retrofits, and in the end it becomes more costly as well.
Thank you for that. Miss Amelia, did you want to add anything to the fray of the conversation?
Yeah, I don't know if I know any good starting points. What I can say is I guess it's best. I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs, but it's best when their desire to solve something comes from a personal problem that they're facing. I think that's when the greatest passion and sort of drive is born to really take this product all the way to its end stage. So in order to do that, I mean, if you have one that you're already realizing, like, I don't know why, when I order food in the pandemic, now that I'm ordering much more food, why is there so much waste in packaging, and is there not a better way around this? Is there not a way to share this or reuse this? For example, that would be best if it comes from within. If not, also maybe do observations of housewives in the kitchen, in the homes, how they're, I'm sure there's a lot of, it doesn't have to be housewives, it's just one example, but, because they handle so much of the food and the garbage and the clothing needs of the family, there must be a lot of frustration that you can find in conversations with them. So that might be another opportunity. But otherwise, I've also seen, a lot of startups in our 2 open IDO challenges. So one was the Beyond the Bag Challenge, which was about thinking of alternatives to the single-use plastic bag. And we had so many ideas there. And the other one was the Next Gen Cup Challenge. So what are alternatives to the takeaway cup? And so, yeah, I think there's lots of kind of low-hanging fruit starting points. When you start.
Thank you, Miss Amelia. We're actually wrapping up now our panel, but a question came up, and I think it's a very important question that we need to talk about, especially for businesses listening to us, from Ping Manongdo, and you can answer very briefly. We all know that in business, it's the triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit. And so Ping asks if you could answer, just based on your experience, what economic incentives are businesses in the Philippines starting to reap by shifting away from linear models of production? Maybe a short answer from each of our panelists.
Okay, let me start. I cannot really cite a specific example, but these are things that you can more or less, I think you can reap from circularity, is the possibility of reducing the utilization of resources, and that eventually translates to reduced expenses when it comes to raw materials. And then when you are able to identify byproducts from your process, which can eventually be used as another output from your process, then that can potentially be a source of another income or profit.
Thank you, Dr. Kath. Dave, have we seen any economic incentives from your experience with your Walaosik Sari-Sari stores?
There is a market for sure that's growing, so we need to tap into it. There are different opportunities that call for innovation of our time. So I think that is leading to incentives, but I have to be frank that the transition has costs. There are upfront costs, and we're able to assist them because there are agencies that are supporting the transition or subsidizing the transition. So still remains to be seen, but very quickly the costs are externalized when we're not doing the shift anyway. So there's costs somewhere else that we're just taking on this new model.
Thanks, Dave. And Miss Amelia, from the perspective of a big business, how has it been in terms of economic incentives moving forward?
Yes. I think I mentioned also in my presentation that, looking into circular models allows for, additional revenue streams like they found for Philips when they moved from, selling products to turning it into services. That was a way to look at additional revenue stream. I think another one is resource reuse. So, companies like Apple who have committed to not extracting from the earth. If you're not using virgin material and you're reusing material that you're collecting, then that means, lower cost in the long term. But as everyone mentioned, there are investments that need to be made in the short term in the transition.
Thank you, Miss Amelia, and thank you so much to our awesome panel. I really learned a lot. I'm not an expert of circular design and responsible consumption and production, but I definitely have some food for thought, definitely on the technical side, as well as the things that we can model in terms of businesses who also want to get into this circular economy and responsible consumption and production. Thank you very much, Dr. Kathleen, Miss Amelia, and Dave. Thank you to the esteemed panel for this very engaging discussion. Indeed, changing our ways of production and consumption are multifaceted challenges that need creative and well-designed solutions to be realized in the future. There is a need for major rethinking in the way current practices of big and small companies are designed. And today's insights are definitely certain steps towards the sustainable direction. Thank you so much. This has been Val Bastille of Ayedge, and I'd like to bring the floor back to our beautiful host, Tony.